Welcome to Part 3 of Session 2, Topics and Decision Factors. In Part 1, we covered topics and requirements. In Part 2, we discussed decision factors. Let's now review how to edit and add decision factors in ALIP. The first step to editing topic decision factors is to determine what type of decision needs to be edited and choose the correct edit button. As you can see in the bottom of this screenshot, there are two different edit buttons. Edit Select Decision Factors and Edit All Decision Factors. The Edit All Decision Factors button contains all the decision factors listed for the topic, while the Edit Select Decision Factors button only includes decisions that are most commonly edited by the underwriter. These include RUW, Awaiting Results, Rate, Decline, Postpone, and Correlate. The reason these items were given their own button was to avoid pulling up the bulk of the decision factors when editing. This makes it easier for the underwriter to see what needs to be updated rather than having to scan through all of the decisions which have already been made by ALIP and ORA. It also helps speed up the system, with fewer decision factors to load in the mode list screen upon clicking on the button, and fewer decision factors needing to be updated once the underwriter completes the editing process. In most cases, the underwriter will choose the Edit Select Decision Factors button when updating decision factors. However, there are a few exceptions, such as when we receive new evidence on a decision factor that has already been decisioned. For example, if something has been decisioned Select Preferred and we receive new evidence that now warrants Preferred 2. After choosing either the Edit Select Decision Factor button or the Edit All Decision Factors button, the Edit Decision Factor pop-up box will appear, with the decision factors listed at the top of the first section, followed by several columns with drop-down fields for each decision factor and some additional fields below. The first drop-down field column is where the underwriter will edit the RUW decisions to things such as Select Preferred, Decline, or Rate. The following fields are completed by the underwriter when a decision of rate or reduce amount is chosen, and they include things such as debits, flat extra premiums, benefit multiples, and reductions in risk amount. To add debits, flat extras, or benefit multiples, the underwriter chooses rate as the decision. It is important to know that rate will be chosen whether the debit would cause a class rating such as a plus 120 or not. We use rate for smaller debits such as plus 10 or plus 20 as well. To reduce the amount of coverage, the underwriter will need to select Reduce Amount and add the approved amount. Of course, most decisions returned by the system or edited by the underwriter will be non-smoker standard or discounts such as Select Preferred. Various decline options and waived options are available as well. Be sure to choose Decline or Decline No Reconsideration rather than RNA. They are looking to remove RNA as an option in the future to reduce any confusion. If multiple decision factors across the topics are set to rate and have debits, ALIP will add the debits, roll them up to the decision summary section, and transfer the overall total rating and risk class over to the Make a Decision screen. Finally, to rate and reduce the amount on the same decision factor, the underwriter will need to have two different decision factors, one with a decision of rate and the other with a decision of reduce amount. We will get into how you add a decision factor shortly. Editing decisions through either Edit Decision Factor button affects numerous items. It completes the task, usually releases the requirement status and the topic status typically mimics the decision. There are a few exceptions to this: correlate, reviewed, and incomplete. We will cover correlate and reviewed on the next slide. The incomplete decision is unique to the APS and is chosen when the records are CNR. Though the requirement status will not release, the topic will release, so the case can be finalized. Currently, the underwriter will need to order another APS manually, but in future iterations, the system will order the second APS. If a requirement is marked incomplete, the underwriter would order another to complete the history. Once that requirement and all others are released, the case can be issued. Also, keep in mind, if one decision says rate and another says decline, the topic status will reflect the most adverse status of decline. Let's talk a bit more about decision factor choices correlate, postpone, and review to understand their function and when an underwriter would choose them. Let's begin with correlate. Correlate is used when the underwriter wants to cross-reference this piece of evidence with another outstanding piece of evidence. Be sure to document which piece of evidence you're waiting for to correlate. For example, a questionable ECG where the underwriter awaits the APS to make a final decision. The topic is not released and must be altered again by the underwriter once the other piece of evidence is reviewed and a decision has been made. Now let's move on to postpone. Postpone allows the underwriter to clearly differentiate a short-term conditional decline in a term which is more customer-friendly. An additional required drop-down for reconsideration period will open with options such as 6 months, 12 months, until recommended testing consults are completed, until recommended surgery is completed, and other freeform. Finally, let's discuss reviewed. Reviewed acknowledges that the evidence has been reviewed, but additional decision factors are needed. Additional decision factors are added to the topic by the underwriter based on the evidence. For example, for an APS with a history of diabetes and cancer, the underwriter marks the placeholder decision factor as reviewed and adds 2 additional decision factors, one to rate the diabetes and one to rate the cancer. In the next section of the Edit Decision Factor screen, MIBs related to the evidence you're reviewing should be coded on that specific topic. Other codes can be entered on other topics, and all will roll up to the decision summary screen and transfer to the MAD screen. Try to avoid entering duplicate codes, for example, a diabetes code on the teleapp topic and the same on the APS topic. Some topics will allow the underwriter to code up to 8 MIBs for that topic. Other topics only allow fewer MIBs to be coded. Those topics, such as the blood profile and the APS, will allow for the 8 MIB codes. If more MIBs need to be coded than the slots offered for the topic, they can be coded directly on the Make a Decision screen. Also, in this section is a place to mark if a health statement on delivery is needed. Also in this section is a menu of restrictions which can be added to a policy being decisioned. Choices include no additional coverage without additional requirements, no reinsurance, do not reinstate, no AOP, this amount only, permanent plan only, and no future coverage at this rate. Hold the Control key to add more than one restriction or to uncheck a restriction marked in error. Agent Geo are made aware of the restrictions once decisioned to avoid confusion over unpaid change requests or new applications. They are also listed in the Insurance History section on subsequent ALIP cases. This section also includes 2 drop-down menus where the underwriter must choose when the client can be reconsidered for coverage. One dropdown is used when the decision is set to postpone, and the other is used when the decision is set to decline. Notice the difference in choices. Postpone is a short-term declination which is contingent upon a short time period elapsing or some test or task being accomplished. For example, if the client had bypass surgery 6 months ago, the underwriter would choose 6 months, so that a year will have passed since the surgery, at which point an offer would be possible. Or, if the primary insured was told to have an MRI performed, but we don't know when this will happen, the underwriter would choose until recommended testing consult completed. As for decline, it is broken down into your normal yearly timeframes. The next section is the amendment section. Choosing an impairment or issue listed under the amendment field, such as arthritis, pre-fills the amendment details, similar to the disease amendments in MB21. The underwriter can edit the amendment details if the situation does not fit the client precisely. The freeform and general impairment options allow for even more possibilities. Some other possible options the underwriter has to create amendments on the decision factor screen include anemia, asthma, benefit rider removed or declined, chest pain, colon polyps, face amount reduced, financial total coverage, and no malignancy. The final section of the Edit Decision Factor screen includes a freeform text box called Notes. Because we are documenting so many of our details throughout the rest of the screen, we often don't need to make notes. We will discuss this shift in freeform notes in MB21 to structured data in a future session in detail. Finally, select Next to update the topic and automatically navigate back to the workbench. Sometimes it is necessary to add a decision factor when the underwriter discovers information that was not read by ALIP or ORA. For example, an APS history such as diabetes or cancer, phone calls from the agent where the underwriter creates a phone call topic and adds a decision factor based on the content of the call. Select the Add Decision Factor button to start the process. After selecting the Add Decision Factor button, a mode list screen appears. Notice the Add Decision Factor screen is very similar to the Edit Decision Factor screen. In Add Decision Factor, a decision factor is created but may also be edited simultaneously if the underwriter has enough information to make a decision. The big difference when adding a decision factor is having to choose the applies to and the decision factor items, which are already chosen for you when the system generates a decision factor. Based on the decision factor selected by the underwriter, the reason drop-down list will dynamically update. Note the underwriter can add another decision factor by choosing Yes to add another decision factor and selecting Next. At this point, another Add Decision Factor page will display for the underwriter to fill in. The drop-down options for Applies To will vary depending upon what the client has applied for. In this example, the client applied for a base policy represented as life and for WP. The underwriter must choose the Applies To, which corresponds to the type of decision being made. For example, if the APS noted chronic low back pain with medication use and the underwriter decided to deny WP, then they would choose the Applies To for disability waiver of premium so that it can be documented. The Applies To field will never include benefits or riders that the client did not apply for. Once the Applies To is chosen, the decision factor will need to be chosen. This dropdown will be specific to the topic that you're adding the decision factor to. For example, here we are adding a decision factor to the APS topic, which means most of the decision factor choices will be medical in nature, related to what would be found in an APS. Though most decision factors are medical, non-medical information may be seen as well, as seen in the habits choice. Also notice that each of the choices are listed twice as both admitted and non-admitted. It is important to choose the correct option as this will influence what information the agent receives when the case is completed. Notice in this example, the underwriter is adding a decision factor which applies to the life portion of the policy. Once life was chosen as the applies to, the flat extra rating drop-down box limited the underwriter's choices to FEPs. So, when the underwriter decided to rate for the life portion, they then must enter a debit point, a flat extra, or both to rate the base policy. Notice in this example, the underwriter is adding a decision factor which applies to the disability waiver of premium on the policy. Once WP was chosen as the applies to, the flat extra rating drop-down box limited the underwriter's choices to benefit multiples of ×2 and ×3. So, when the underwriter decided to rate for the waiver of premium, they then must choose between the benefit multiples. Once a decision factor is added to the topic status will update to the most appropriate information based on all of the decision factors listed on the topic. In this image, we see that Connor added a decision factor of cardiovascular on the life of the insured. He set the decision to postpone and wrote a note indicating the reason was a recent heart surgery. Depending upon which applies to you choose, life or a specific benefit or rider, the decision choices are limited. For example, you would not use a decision of select preferred for waiver of premium, you would choose accept. In the same respect, you would not use accept for a life decision. Use of accept must be limited to the benefits and riders because the life decision rolls up to the blue topic status bar and to the decision summary for an overall rating. Accept does not indicate how the decision factor affects the rate. Therefore, we would choose a specific rating such as select preferred instead of accept. This may feel a bit counterintuitive in some cases, such as on the MIB topic, because marking the decision on an MIB accept seems appropriate. However, even though we don't rate based on MIB, select preferred would be the accurate decision on this topic. In ALIP, we are setting up the overall decision with each life decision factor we document. In Session 2, Part 3, we covered how to edit and add decision factors. Thank you for attending this training, Topics and Decision Factors, Part 3.